Amazon River.
The Amazon River in South America is the largest river by discharge of water in the world, averaging a discharge of about 209,000 cubic meters per second, greater than the next 7 largest independent rivers combined. It is also generally regarded as the second longest river in the world, has the largest drainage basin in the world, about 7,050,000 square kilometers, and accounts for approximately 1/5 of the world's total river flow. The river would have the biggest drainage basin in the world, even just counting Brazil, which it enters with only 1/5 of the volume that will finally be discharged into the Atlantic. In its upper stretches, above the confluence of the Rio Negro, the Amazon is called Solimões in Brazil. However, in Peru, Colombia and Ecuador, as well as the rest of the Spanish-speaking world, the river is generally called the Amazon downstream from the confluence of the Marañón and Ucayali rivers in Peru. The Ucayali-Apurimac river system is considered the main source of the Amazon, with its main headstream being the Cajuazanta glacial stream flowing off the Nevado Mismi mountain. The width of the Amazon is between 1.6 and 10 kilometers, 1.0 and 6.2 miles, at low stage, but expands during the wet season to 48 kilometers, 30 miles, or more. The river enters the Atlantic Ocean in a broad estuary about 240 kilometers, 150 miles, wide. The mouth of the main stem is 80 kilometers, 50 miles. Because of its vast dimensions, it is sometimes called the River Sea. The first bridge in the Amazon River system, over the Rio Negro, opened on October 10, 2010 near Manaus, Brazil. The total volume of water discharging from the Amazon River in a year is about 6,591 cubic kilometers. To compare, the water volume of Lake Baikal is 23,615 cubic kilometers.
Drainage area.
The Amazon Basin, the largest in the world, covers about 40% of South America, an area of approximately 7,050,000 square kilometers. 2,720,000 square miles. It drains from west to east, from Iquitos in Peru, across Brazil to the Atlantic. It gathers its waters from 5 degrees north latitude to 20 degrees south latitude. Its most remote sources are found on the Interandean Plateau, just a short distance from the Pacific Ocean. The locals often refer to it as El Jefe Negro, referring to an ancient god of fertility. The Amazon River and its tributaries are characterized by extensive forested areas that become flooded every rainy season. Every year the river rises more than 9 meters, 30 feet, flooding the surrounding forests, known as valzee, flooded forests. The Amazon's flooded forests are the most extensive example of this habitat type in the world. In an average dry season, 110,000 square kilometers, 42,000 square miles, of land are water covered, while in the wet season, the flooded area of the Amazon basin rises to 350,000 square kilometers, 140,000 square miles. The quantity of water released by the Amazon to the Atlantic Ocean is enormous, up to 300,000 cubic meters per second, 11 million cubic feet per second, in the rainy season, with an average of 209,000 cubic meters per second, 7,400,000 cubic feet per second, from 1973 to 1990. The Amazon is responsible for about 20% of the Earth's fresh water entering the ocean. The river pushes a vast plume of fresh water into the ocean. The plume is about 400 kilometers, 250 miles, long and between 100 and 200 kilometers, 62 and 124 miles, wide. The fresh water, being lighter, flows on top of the seawater, diluting the salinity and altering the color of the ocean surface over an area up to 1 million square miles, 2,600,000 kilometers in extent. For centuries ships have reported fresh water near the Amazon's mouth, yet well out of sight of land in what otherwise seemed to be the open ocean. The Atlantic has sufficient wave and tidal energy to carry most of the Amazon sediments out to sea. Thus the Amazon does not form a true delta. The great deltas of the world are all in relatively protected bodies of water, while the Amazon empties directly into the turbulent Atlantic. There is a natural water union between the Amazon and the Orinoco basins, the so-called Cassiquiare Canal. The Cassiquiare is a river distributary of the upper Orinoco, which flows southward into the Rio Negro, which in turn flows into the Amazon. The Cassiquiare is the largest river on Earth that links two major river systems, a so-called bifurcation.
Origins.
The Amazon River has a series of major river systems in Colombia, Ecuador and Peru, some of which flow into the Marañón and Ucayali, others directly into the Amazon proper. Among others, these include the following rivers: Putumayo, Caqueta, Vopis, Guaina, Morona, Pastaza, Nucuri, Urituiacu, Chamara, Tigre, Nanao, Napo, and Holiga. The most distant source of the Amazon was established in 1996, 2001, 2007, and 2008, as a glacial stream on a snow-capped 5,597 m, 18,363 feet, peak called Nevado Mismi in the Peruvian Andes, roughly 160 kilometers, 99 miles, west of Lake Titicaca and 700 kilometers, 430 miles, southeast of Lima. The waters from Nevado Mismi flow into the quebradas Cajuazanta and Apaqueta, which flow into the Rio Apurimac, which is a tributary of the Ucayali, which later joins the Marañón to form the Amazon proper. While the Ucayali-Marañón confluence is the point at which most geographers place the beginning of the Amazon proper, in Brazil the river is known at this point as the Solimões das Águas. Further downriver from that confluence the darkly colored waters of the Rio Negro meet the sandy-colored Rio Solimões, and for over 6 kilometers, 4 miles, these waters run side by side without mixing. After the confluence of Apurimac and Ucayali, the river leaves Andean terrain and is surrounded by floodplain. From this point to the Marañón, some 1,600 kilometers, 990 miles, the forested banks are just out of water and are inundated long before the river attains its maximum flood stage. The low riverbanks are interrupted by only a few hills, and the river enters the enormous Amazon rainforest. The river systems and floodplains in Brazil, Peru, Ecuador, Colombia and Venezuela, whose waters drain into the Solimões and its tributaries, are called the Upper Amazon. The Amazon River proper runs mostly through Brazil and Peru. It is part of the border between Colombia and Peru, and it has tributaries reaching into Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, and Bolivia.
Flooding.
Not all of the Amazon's tributaries flood at the same time of the year. Many branches begin flooding in November and may continue to rise until June. The rise of the Rio Negro starts in February or March and begins to recede in June. The Madeira River rises and falls 2 months earlier than most of the rest of the Amazon. The depth of the Amazon between Manacapuru and Óbidos has been calculated as between 20 to 26 meters, 66 to 85 feet. At Manacapuru the Amazon's water level is only about 24 meters, 79 feet, above mean sea level. More than half of the water in the Amazon downstream of Manacapuru is below sea level. In its lowermost section the Amazon's depth averages 20 to 50 meters, 66 to 164 feet, in some places as much as 100 meters, 330 feet. The main river is navigable for large ocean steamers to Manaus, 1,500 kilometers, 930 miles, upriver from the mouth. Smaller ocean vessels of 3,000 tons or 9,000 tons and 5.5 meters, 18 feet, draft can reach as far as Iquitos, Peru, 3,600 kilometers, 2,200 miles, from the sea. Smaller riverboats can reach 780 kilometers, 480 miles, higher as far as Actual Point. Beyond that, small boats frequently ascend to the Pongo de Mansaraig, just above Actual Point. Annual flooding is caused by tidal waves called pororoca. The waves occur in late winter at high tide, when the Atlantic Ocean overlaps into the river. The resulting waves can be up to 4 meters high and travel 13 kilometers inland.
Geography.
At some points the river divides into anabranches, or multiple channels, often very long, with inland and lateral channels, all connected by a complicated system of natural canals, cutting the low, flat agapo lands. which are never more than 5 meters, 16 feet, above low river, into many islands. From the town of Canaria at the Great Bend of the Amazon to the Negro, vast areas of land are submerged at high water, above which only the upper part of the trees of the somber forests appear. Near the mouth of the Rio Negro to Serpa, nearly opposite the river Madeira, the banks of the Amazon are low, until approaching Manaus, they rise to become rolling hills. At Obidos, a bluff 17 m, 56 feet, above the river is backed by low hills. The lower Amazon seems to have once been a gulf of the Atlantic Ocean, the waters of which washed the cliffs near Obidos. Only about 10% of the Amazon's water enters downstream of Obidos, very little of which is from the northern slope of the valley. The drainage area of the Amazon basin above Obidos city is about 5 million square kilometers, 1,900,000 square miles, and, below, only about 1 million square kilometers, 390,000 square miles, around 20%, exclusive of the 1,400,000 square kilometers, 540,000 square miles, of the Tocantins Basin. The Tocantins River enters the Amazon very close to its mouth. In the lower reaches of the river, the north bank consists of a series of steep, tabletop hills extending for about 240 kilometers, 150 miles, from opposite the mouth of the Xingal as far as Monte Alegre. These hills are cut down to a kind of terrace which lies between them and the river. On the south bank, above the Xingu, a line of low bluffs bordering the floodplain extends nearly to Santarém in a series of gentle curves before they bend to the southwest, and, abutting upon the lower Tapajos, merge into the bluffs which form the terrace margin of the Tapajos River Valley.
Mouth.
The definition of where exactly the mouth of the Amazon is located, and how wide it is a matter of dispute, because of the area's peculiar geography. The Para and the Amazon are connected by a series of river channels called furrows near the town of Breves. Between them lies Marajo, the world's largest combined river sea island. If the Para River and the Marajo Island ocean frontage are included, the Amazon estuary is some 325 kilometers, 202 miles, wide. In this case, the width of the mouth of the river is usually measured from Cabo Norte, the cape located straight east of Prague but in the Brazilian state of Amapá, to Ponta da Tijuca near the town of Curuca, in the state of Para. A more conservative measurement excluding the Para River estuary, from the mouth of the Araguari River to Ponta do Navio on the northern coast of Marajo, would still give the mouth of the Amazon a width of over 180 kilometers, 110 miles. If only the river's main channel is considered, between the islands of Curua, state of Amapá, and Juripiri, state of Para, the width falls to about 15 kilometers, 9.3 miles.
Fauna.
More than one-third of all known species in the world live in the Amazon rainforest, a giant tropical forest and river basin with an area that stretches more than 5,400,000 square kilometers, 2,100,000 square miles. It is the richest tropical forest in the world in terms of biodiversity. There are over 3,000 species of fish currently recognized in the Amazon basin, with more being discovered every year.
Mammals.
Along with the Orinoco, the Amazon is one of the main habitats of the boto, also known as the Amazon river dolphin, Inia geoffrensis. It is the largest species of river dolphin, and it can grow to lengths of up to 2.6 meters, 8 feet 6 in. The color of his skin changes with age. It varies from gray when it is young, to pink and white as it matures. The dolphins use echolocation to navigate and hunt in the river's tricky depths. The boto is the subject of a legend in Brazil about a dolphin that turns into a man and seduces maidens by the riverside. The tucui, Sotalia fluviatilis, also a dolphin species, is found both in the rivers of the Amazon basin and in the coastal waters of South America. The Amazonian manatee, Trichechus inugais, also known as sea arco, is found in the northern Amazon River basin and its tributaries. It is a mammal and an herbivore. Its population is limited to freshwater habitats and unlike other manatees, it does not venture into salt water. It is classified as vulnerable by the International Union for Conservation of Nature. The Amazon and its tributaries are the main habitat of the giant otter, Pteronura brasiliensis. It is a member of the weasel family and is the largest of its kind. Because of habitat destruction and hunting, its population has dramatically decreased.
Reptiles.
The anaconda is found in shallow waters in the Amazon basin. One of the world's largest species of snake, the anaconda spends most of its time in the water, with just its nostrils above the surface. In addition to the thousands of species of fish, the river supports crabs, algae, and turtles. The caiman, which is related to alligators and other crocodilians, also inhabits the Amazon.
Fish.
The Amazonian fish fauna is the center of diversity for neotropical fishes, of which more than 5,600 species are currently known. The bull shark, Carcharinus lelicas, has been reported 4,000 kilometers, 2,500 miles, up the Amazon River at Iquitos in Peru. The arapaima, known in Brazil as the pirarucu, Arapaima gigas, is a South American tropical freshwater fish. It is one of the largest freshwater fish in the world, reportedly with a maximum length of 3 meters, 9.8 feet, and weight up to 200 kilograms, 440 pounds. Another Amazonian freshwater fish is the arowana, or awana in Portuguese, such as the silver arowana, Osteoglossum bicerosum, which is also a predator and very similar to the arapaima but only reaches a length of 120 centimeters, 47 inches. Also present in large numbers is the notorious piranha, an omnivorous fish which congregates in large schools and may attack livestock and even humans. There are approximately 30 to 60 species of piranha. However, only a few of its species are known to attack humans, most notably Pygocentris natariri, the red-bellied piranha. The kangaroo are a number of general parasitic, freshwater catfish in the family Trichomicteridae. All are native to the Amazon River. The electric eel, Electrophorus electricus, and more than 100 species of weakly electric fishes gymnotiforms also inhabit the Amazon basin. River stingrays, Potamodrigonidae, are also known.
Microbiota.
Freshwater microbes are generally not very well known, even less so for a pristine ecosystem like the Amazon. Recently, mutagenomics has provided answers to what kind of microbes inhabit the river. The most important microbes in the Amazon River are actinobacteria, alpha-proteobacteria, beta-proteobacteria, gamma-proteobacteria and Cranarchiota.
Geology.
The Amazon River originated as a transcontinental river in the Miocene epoch between 11.8 million and 11.3 million and took its present shape approximately 2.4 million years ago. The Amazon once flowed west as part of a Proto-Amazon Congo River system, from the interior of present-day Africa when the continents were joined as Western Gondwana. 15 million years ago, the Andes were formed by the collision of the South American plate with the Nazca plate. The rise of the Andes and the linkage of the Brazilian and Guyana bedrock shields, blocked the river and caused the Amazon to become a vast inland sea. Gradually this inland sea became a massive swampy, freshwater lake and the marine inhabitants adapted to life in freshwater. For example, over 20 species of stingray, most closely related to those found in the Pacific Ocean, can be found today in the freshwaters of the Amazon. 10 to 11 million years ago, waters worked through the sandstone from the west and the Amazon began to flow eastward, leading to the emergence of the Amazon rainforest. During ice ages, sea levels dropped and the Great Amazon Lake rapidly drained and became a river, which would eventually become the world's largest, draining the most extensive expanse of rainforest on the planet.
History. Pre-colonial civilization.
During what many archaeologists call the formative period, Amazonian societies were deeply involved in the emergence of South America's highland agrarian systems, and possibly contributed directly to the social and religious fabric constitutive of the Andean civilizational orders. There is ample evidence for complex large-scale, pre-Columbian social formations, including chiefdoms, in many areas of Amazonia, particularly the interfluvial regions, and even large towns and cities. For instance, the pre-Columbian culture on the island of Marajo may have developed social stratification and supported a population of 100,000 people. The Native Americans of the Amazon rainforest may have used terra preta to make the land suitable for the large-scale agriculture needed to support large populations and complex social formations such as chiefdoms. Many indigenous tribes engaged in constant warfare. James Stewart Olson wrote, "The Munduruku expansion dislocated and displaced the Kawaib, breaking the tribe down into much smaller groups." First came to the attention of Europeans in 1770 when they began a series of widespread attacks on Brazilian settlements along the Amazon River.
European discovery.
In March 1500, Spanish conquistador Vicente Yanes Pinzon was the first European to sail into the river. Pinzon called the river flow Rio Santa Maria del Mar Dulce, later shortened to Mar Dulce, literally, sweet sea, because of its fresh water pushing out into the ocean.
Exploration.
Gonzalo Pizarro set off in 1541 to explore east of Quito into the South American interior in search of El Dorado, the city of gold, and La Canela, the valley of cinnamon. After 170 kilometers, the Coca River joined the Napo River, at a point now known as Puerto Francisco de Orellana. The party stopped for a few weeks to build a boat just upriver from this confluence. They continued downriver through an uninhabited area, where they could not find food. Orellana offered and was ordered to follow the Napo River, then known as Rio de la Canela, Cinnamon River, and return with food for the party. Based on intelligence received from a captive native chief named De Licola, they expected to find food within a few days downriver by ascending another river to the north. Orellana took about 57 men, the boat, and some canoes and left Pizarro's party on December 26, 1541. However, Orellana apparently missed the confluence, probably with the Agrico, where he was to look for food. By the time he and his men reached another village, many of them were sick from hunger and eating noxious plants, and near death. 7 men died at that village. His men threatened to mutiny if he followed his orders, and the expedition turned back to join Pizarro's larger party. He accepted to change the purpose of the expedition to discover new lands in the name of the King of Spain, and the men built a larger boat in which to navigate downstream. After a journey of 600 kilometers down the Napo River, they reached a further major confluence, at a point near modern Iquitos, and then followed the upper Amazon, now known as the Solimos, for a further 1,200 kilometers to its confluence with the Rio Negro, near modern Manaus, which they reached on June 3, 1542. On the Njamunda River, a tributary of the Amazon downstream from Manaus, Orellana's party had a fierce battle with warriors who, they reported, were led by fierce female warriors who beat the men to death with clubs if they tried to retreat. Orellana's men began referring to the women as Amazons, a reference to the women of Greek mythology. The river was initially known as the Maranon, the name by which the Peruvian part of the river is still known today, or Rio de Orellana. It later became known as the Rio Amazonas, the name by which it is still known in both Spanish and Portuguese. Regarding the initial mission of finding cinnamon, Pizarro reported to the king that they had found cinnamon trees, but that they could not be profitably harvested. In fact, true cinnamon, Cinnamomum verum, is not native to South America. Other related cinnamon-containing plants, of the family Lauraceae, are fairly common in that part of the Amazon, and Pizarro probably saw some of these. The expedition reached the mouth of the Amazon on August 24, 1542, demonstrating the practical navigability of the great river. In 1560, another Spanish conquistador, Lope de Aguirre, may have made the second descent of the Amazon. Historians are uncertain whether the river he descended was the Amazon or the Orinoco River, which runs more or less parallel to the Amazon further north. Between 1637 and 1647, the Portuguese explorer Pedro Teixeira was the first European to ascend the river from Belém, near the mouth, to Quito, part of the Spanish Viceroyalty of Peru, and then to return the same way. Teixeira's expedition was massive, some 2,000 people in 37 large canoes. From 1648 to 1652, Portuguese-Brazilian bandeirante Antonio Raposo Tavares led one of the longest-known expeditions from São Paulo overland to the mouth of the Amazon, investigating many of its tributaries, including the Rio Negro, and covering a distance of more than 10,000 kilometers, 6,214 miles. In what is currently Brazil, Ecuador, Bolivia, Colombia, Peru, and Venezuela, a number of colonial and religious settlements were established along the banks of primary rivers and tributaries for the purpose of trade, slaving and evangelization among the indigenous peoples of the vast rainforest, such as the Urarina. In the late 1600s, Spanish Jesuit Father Samuel Fritz, apostle of the Omaguas, established some 40 mission villages.
Scientific exploration.
Early scientific, zoological and botanical exploration of the Amazon River and basin occurred in the second half of 18th century through the first half of the 19th century. In 1743, Charles Marie de la Condamine accomplished the first scientific exploration of the Amazon River. The template mirrors being considered for deletion. Alexander von Humboldt 1799–1804, Johann Baptist von Spix and Philip von Martius, 1817–1820, William Henry Bates and Alfred Russel Wallace, 1848–1859.
Post-colonial exploitation and settlement.
The Coronadium, 1835–1840, one of the bloodiest regional wars ever in Brazil, which was chiefly directed against the white ruling class, reduced the population of Para from about 100,000 to 60,000. The total population of the Brazilian portion of the Amazon basin in 1850 was perhaps 300,000, of whom about two-thirds comprised by Europeans and slaves, the slaves amounting to about 25,000. The Brazilian Amazon's principal commercial city, Para, now Belém, had from 10,000 to 12,000 inhabitants, including slaves. The town of Manaus, now Manaus, at the mouth of the Rio Negro, had a population between 1,000 to 1,500. All the remaining villages, as far up as Tabatinga, on the Brazilian frontier of Peru, were relatively small. On September 6, 1850, Emperor Pedro II of Brazil sanctioned a law authorizing steam navigation on the Amazon and gave the Viscount of Moura, Irineu Evangelista de Souza, the task of putting it into effect. He organized the Companhia Navegação e Comércio do Amazonas in Rio de Janeiro in 1852. In the following year it commenced operations with 3 small steamers, the Monarch, the Marajo and Rio Negro. At first, navigation was principally confined to the main river. And even in 1857 a modification of the government contract only obliged the company to a monthly service between Para and Manaus, with steamers of 200 tons cargo capacity, a second line to make 6 round voyages a year between Manaus and Tabatinga, and a third, 2 trips a month between Para and Camatá. This was the first step in opening up the vast interior. The success of the venture called attention to the opportunities for economic exploitation of the Amazon, and a second company soon opened commerce on the Madeira, Puris and Negro. A third established a line between Para and Manaus. And a fourth found it profitable to navigate some of the smaller streams. In that same period, the Amazonas Company was increasing its fleet. Meanwhile, private individuals were building and running small steam craft of their own on the main river as well as on many of its tributaries. On July 31, 1867, the government of Brazil, constantly pressed by the maritime powers and by the countries encircling the upper Amazon basin, especially Peru, decreed the opening of the Amazon to all countries, but they limited this to certain defined points: Tabatinga, on the Amazon; Camatá, on the Tocantins; Santarém, on the Tapajos; Boba, on the Madeira; and Manaus, on the Rio Negro. The Brazilian decree took effect on September 7, 1867. Thanks in part to the mercantile development associated with steamboat navigation coupled with the internationally driven demand for natural rubber, the Peruvian city of Iquitos became a thriving, cosmopolitan center of commerce. Foreign companies settled in Iquitos, from whence they controlled the extraction of rubber. In 1851 Iquitos had a population of 200, and by 1900 its population reached 20,000. In the 1860s, approximately 3,000 tons of rubber was being exported annually, and by 1911 annual exports had grown to 44,000 tons, representing 9.3% of Peru's exports. During the rubber boom it is estimated that diseases brought by immigrants such as typhus or malaria killed 40,000 native Amazonians. The first direct foreign trade with Manaus was commenced around 1874. Local trade along the river was carried on by the English successors to the Amazonas Company, the Amazon Steam Navigation Company, as well as numerous small steamboats, belonging to companies and firms engaged in the rubber trade, navigating the Negro, Madeira, Puris and many other tributaries, such as the Maran to ports as distant as Nauta, Peru. By the turn of the 20th century, the exports of the Amazon basin were India rubber, cacao beans, Brazil nuts and a few other products of minor importance, such as pelts and exotic forest produce, resins, barks, woven hammocks, prized bird feathers, live animals, and extracted goods such as lumber and gold.
20th century development.
For 350 years after the first European encounter of the Amazon by Pinzon, the Portuguese portion of the basin remained an untended former food gathering and planned agricultural landscape occupied by the indigenous peoples who survived the arrival of European diseases. 4 centuries after the European discovery of the Amazon River, the total cultivated area in its basin was probably less than 65 square kilometers, 25 square miles, excluding the limited and crudely cultivated areas among the mountains at its extreme headwaters. This situation changed dramatically during the 20th century. Wary of foreign exploitation of the nation's resources, Brazilian governments in the 1940s set out to develop the interior, away from the seaboard where foreigners owned large tracts of land. The original architect of this expansion was President Getulio Vargas, with the demand for rubber from the Allied forces in World War II providing funding for the drive. In 1960, the construction of the new capital city of Brasilia in the interior also contributed to the opening up of the Amazon basin. A large-scale colonization program saw families from northeastern Brazil relocated to the forests, encouraged by promises of cheap land. Many settlements grew along the road from Brasilia to Belém, but rainforest soil proved difficult to cultivate. Still, long-term development plans continued. Roads were cut through the forests, and in 1970, the work on the Trans-Amazonian Highway, Trans-Amazonica, network began. The network's 3 pioneering highways were completed within 10 years but never fulfilled their promise. Large portions of the Trans-Amazonian and its accessory roads, such as BR-319, Manaus-Porto Velho, are derelict and impassable in the rainy season. Small towns and villages are scattered across the forest, and because its vegetation is so dense, some remote areas are still unexplored. With a current population of 1.8 million people, Manaus is the Amazon's largest city. Manaus alone represents approximately 50% of the population of the Brazilian state of Amazonas, which is the largest state. The racial makeup of the city is 64% Pardo, mulatto and mestizo, and 32% white.
Dispute regarding length.
While debate as to whether the Amazon or the Nile is the world's longest river has gone on for many years, the historic consensus of geographic authorities has been to regard the Amazon as the second longest river in the world, with the Nile being the longest. However, the Amazon has been measured by different geographers as being anywhere between 6,259 and 6,800 kilometers, 3,889 and 4,225 miles, long. It is often said to be at least 6,400 kilometers, 4,000 miles, long. The Nile is reported to be anywhere from 5,499 to 6,690 kilometers, 3,417 to 4,157 miles. Often it is said to be about 6,650 kilometers, 4,130 miles, long. There are many factors that can affect these measurements. A study by Brazilian scientists concluded that the Amazon is actually longer than the Nile. Using Nevado Mismi, which in 2001 was labeled by the National Geographic Society as the Amazon source, these scientists made new calculations of the Amazon's length. They calculated the Amazon's length as 6,992 kilometers, 4,345 miles. Using the same techniques, they calculated the length of the Nile as 6,853 kilometers, 4,258 miles, which is longer than previous estimates but still shorter than the Amazon. They made it possible by measuring the Amazon downstream to the beginning of the tidal estuary of Canal do Sul and then, after a sharp turn back, following tidal canals surrounding the Isle of Marajo and finally including the marine waters of the Rio Paraguay in its entire length. Guido Gelli, Director of Science at the Brazilian Institute of Geography and Statistics, IBGE, told the Brazilian TV network Globo in June 2007 that it could be considered as a fact that the Amazon was the longest river in the world. However, other geographers have had access to the same data since 2001, and a consensus has yet to emerge to support the claims of these Brazilian scientists. The length of both the Amazon and the Nile remains open to interpretation and continued debate.
Underground river.
Scientists have discovered the longest underground river, actually a salt aquifer, in the world, in Brazil, running for a length of 6,000 kilometers, 3,700 miles, at a depth of nearly 4,000 meters, 13,000 feet. It flows from the Andean foothills to the Atlantic coast in a nearly west-to-east direction like the Amazon River. The discovery was made public in August 2011 meeting of the Brazilian Geophysical Society in Rio de Janeiro. The river, named Hamtsa after the discoverer, an Indian-born scientist Vela Hamtsa who is working with the National Observatory at Rio, makes it the first and geologically unusual instance of a twin river system flowing at different levels of the Earth's crust in Brazil. If the slowing down of certain seismic waves caused by the damp spot helped uncover the underground ocean, the unusual temperature variation with depth measured in 241 inactive oil wells helped locate the subterranean river. Except for the flow direction, the Amazon and the Hamtsa have very different characteristics. The most obvious ones are their width and flow speed. While the Amazon is 1 kilometer, 0.62 miles, to 100 kilometers, 62 miles, wide, the Hamtsa is 200 kilometers, 120 miles, to 400 kilometers, 250 miles, in width. But the flow speed is 5 meters per second, 16 feet per second, in the Amazon and less than 1 millimeter per second, 0.039 inches per second, speed in the Hamtsa. Several geological factors have played a vital role in the formation and existence of these subterranean water bodies. The underground ocean, discovered in 2007, has been formed when the plate carrying the Pacific Ocean bottom gets dragged and ends up under the continental plate. Water at such depths would normally escape upwards, but the unusual conditions that exist along the eastern Pacific Rim allow the moisture to remain intact. In the case of the Hamtsa, the porous and permeable sedimentary rocks behave as conduits for the water to sink to greater depths. East-west trending faults and the karst topography present along the northern border of the Amazon basin may have some role in supplying water to the river. If the impermeable rocks stop the vertical flow, the west-to-east gradient of the topography directs it to flow towards the Atlantic Ocean. Unlike the Hamtsa, the 153 km long underground river in Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula and the 8.2 km long Cabayucan River in the Puerto Princesa Subterranean River National Park in the Philippines have come into being thanks to the karst topography. Water in these places drills its way downward by dissolving the carbonate rock to form an extensive underground river system.
Major tributaries.
The Amazon has over 1,100 tributaries, 17 of which are over 1,500 kilometers, 930 miles, long. Some of the more notable ones are:
List by length.
6,259.2 kilometers, 3,889.3 miles, to 6,712 kilometers, 4,171 miles. Amazon, South America, 3,250 kilometers, 2,020 miles. Madeira, Bolivia, Brazil, 3,211 kilometers, 1,995 miles. Puris, Peru, Brazil, 2,820 kilometers, 1,750 miles. Yapra, Colombia, Brazil, 2,639 kilometers, 1,640 miles. Tocantins, Brazil. An aerial view of an Amazon tributary, 2,627 kilometers, 1,632 miles. Araguaia, Brazil, tributary of Tocantins, 2,400 kilometers, 1,500 miles. Churua, Peru, Brazil, 2,250 kilometers, 1,400 miles. Rio Negro, Brazil, Venezuela, Colombia, 1,992 kilometers, 1,238 miles. Tapajos, Brazil, 1,979 kilometers, 1,230 miles. Xingu, Brazil, 1,900 kilometers, 1,200 miles. Ucayali River, Peru, 1,749 kilometers, 1,087 miles. Guapore, Brazil, Bolivia, tributary of Madeira, 1,575 kilometers, 979 miles. Ica, Putumayo, South America, 1,415 kilometers, 879 miles. Maranon, Peru, 1,370 kilometers, 850 miles. Tels Pires, Brazil, tributary of Tapajos, 1,300 kilometers, 810 miles. Iriri, Brazil, tributary of Xingu, 1,240 kilometers, 770 miles. Jaruna, Brazil, tributary of Tapajos, 1,130 kilometers, 700 miles. Madre de Dios, Peru, Bolivia, tributary of Madeira, 1,100 kilometers, 680 miles. Holiga, Peru, tributary